I can't find out what's happening in the town over from me because I'm not part of their Facebook group and I'm not part of their Nextdoor account.
It relates to our current oligarchy.
It has never been this expensive to get my hair and nails done before. My wallet is hurting.
How do you think you're going to solve that?
Like, you can fake until you make it, you know?
How you doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You're very tall.
Yeah. Blue eyes.
Are you in finance?
No, not yet.
You said your name was Graham?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Like the cracker.
Like the cracker. I like it. Well, Graham, like the cracker, you're going to have a minute to pitch. Tell us what you're building.
Gosh.
Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
I like the shirt too, by the way.
Thank you. My girlfriend got it for me.
Very good taste.
Yeah, I know. Abercrombie and Fitch. Who knew?
Huh.
They had like this rebrand recently. Looks great.
That actually does surprise me.
Yeah.
That's now like going to infect my brain. It's like how the world has changed.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Graham, I'm so excited to hear what you're building. You have a minute. What are you building?
So my name's Graham. I'm the founder of Towns Of, a social media platform for locals. So local news used to be something that was delivered to your front doorstep every day. It was basically an essential commodity. It's where you found about what was happening in your neighborhood, advertisements for small businesses that you didn't know you needed, and honestly, just neighborhood news. Now, with the introduction of the internet, local news started to suffer quite a bit. In 2023, 2.5 newspapers closed every single week, and primarily, they're not closed, they're also bought by foreign private equity. SoftBank owns 700 local newspapers. Anyway, Towns Of is a local news and events app for people who live in the suburbs. I came up with this idea because I started running these hyper-local social media pages, which would convert local news into a video format. And today, these pages generate 400,000 views organically every single day with faceless, branded, localized video journalism. I doubled down with this idea, and I started essentially haggling my friends and family for some money to build out this app. I'm non-technical, so I built out this app.
Don't worry, we'll continue.
Okay.
Before do you want to finish that thought?
It's just, I soft launched it on the App Store, soft launched it in just New Jersey.
Have I met you before?
I don't remember, so I'm sorry.
There's either, if we haven't met before, then It makes sense. There's someone building something very similar, or at least the hyper-local social media pages is something that someone said, just an aside. Super interesting.
Cool.
I have a ton of questions. I have feedback on the pitch. It also relates to, were you guys all downstairs when I started to yell about VCs and politics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed that, unfortunately.
It relates to my struggle with our current, what do I want to call it? Oligarchy?
I agree.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm fascinated from that perspective. Let me begin by unraveling a little bit, then we'll get to pitch feedback.
Yeah.
So, in the parts of my brain that went, oh, I don't know. The parts that got excited are obviously like I believe in what you're saying with local news. I believe in what you're saying with the stuff that's shutting down and where we're funding these things is becoming problematic over time. The ownership of local media is problematic. Where my brain though went, oh, I don't know along the way. It was like the comparisons that my brain started to make to Nextdoor.
Sure. Nextdoor is obviously going to be brought
and
up a lot.
Facebook groups.
Sure. So the problem is that their definition of local is too local. It's hyper local. It's town wide. So the problem with the suburbs is that the only way to get information currently is on these hyper local pages. So Nextdoor is one of them, hyper local Facebook groups, but they're only for town wides. So for example, I've lived in the same city my entire life. It's called Glen Rock. It's a big rock in town, 11,000 people in town. And SoftBank owns the local newspaper. So essentially, the only way to get event information and local information is from this hyper-local town with 11,000 people in it, with a Facebook group with 2,000 people in it. I can't find out what's happening in the town over from me because I'm not part of their Facebook group and I'm not part of their Nextdoor account. So
that's interesting. That's super.
Their definitions
that's a good
of
answer.
local is kind of too vague. And to be fair, Nextdoor is a great company. I mean, they're not a great company, but Nextdoor.
You say that because you hope they might buy you one day?
Well, no. So Nextdoor's got some problems. I mean, Nextdoor is operating on a negative 79% profit margin loss, and they're also last year they spent $64 per user. So they've got all this problems.
Why is this? How does it monetize? Actually, I'm not familiar.
Primarily through advertising with small businesses. Now they make a lot of money. I think $250 million a year in revenue, but they're also spending about $200 million in research and development. What does that mean? $122 million on, I think it's marketing and sales, and then another $80 million
so let's take
on
the problem that I haven't used Nextdoor that much, but let's take its problem and just apply it to you and tell me how you're dealing with it. So one of the things that I think happens with these whether it's hyperlocal or somewhat local, regional, let's call it. I like your answer, by the way, to that question.
Yeah.
But even your, let's call it tri-state metro area, could be like a region, would have the same issue they do of when you get hyperlocal and you rely on user-generated content,
Right.
you're going to get power users who are usually the weirdos.
Oh, sorry. You know what? You're right. So
okay, it's not user-generated content.
Towns of isn't user-generated content. Towns of is a local news aggregator. So it's more like a direct consumer.
Interesting.
Nextdoor is a consumer-to-consumer platform.
Yeah.
And I like to say Nextdoor is a glorified Facebook group.
Right.
So
you're aggregating, I get
from
it. So there's like
Patch, Daily Voice, Gannett, all these media companies that have been rolled up.
So you rely though on the existence of good.
Sort of. But the good thing is that we're getting to a point where local news is actually being talked about more and more. Northwestern University has a really great, I think it's a map essentially where it tracks every single year new local newspapers that have opened up in the country. And we're seeing a resurgence of local news in the US.
Okay.
Now, New Jersey, though, which is where I'm soft launched, does have an extremely lush amount of local news. And that is...
I grew up in Bergen County. So
where?
Fort Lee.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. That's super interesting. So you're going to aggregate across them, serve that as a, hey, you don't need to be subscribed to the Bergen Record and this and that. Instead, just go to an app or a social media page.
So it's an app.
Okay.
It's a tech/media company. It uses media as a customer acquisition tool.
And then once I'm on the platform, I'm getting my regional news.
You're getting your regional news. And our definition of local is county-based.
Okay.
So when it comes to events, it's county-based. When it comes to news, it starts with your town, then your county.
So are events like
state.
a bigger part of this than I'm realizing?
What's up?
Are events a bigger part of this than I'm realizing?
So
this is like, I have more questions, but let me rewind to pitch, then let's do more questions. Yeah. I think I am, your pitch was interesting, right? You told good stories and you're very charismatic.
Sure.
However, I didn't realize all the things that were true about your business. Somewhat, you probably said them all, right? Yeah. You said the app at the end and you had a bunch of the pieces. But probably because you have to find a way to like anchor me in what it is, even in a minute.
I totally agree.
That last, I
totally agree.
Maybe it's the last 20. Maybe it's even sometimes the first 20 seconds of like, hey, here's what we are. Let me problem state for you after I tell you what we are. So you can do either approach. But that's one thing that like, because you don't want me to learn too much along the way. But let's zoom back in because it's interesting. So events, in your case, that's user-generated or is that also top-down?
That's user-generated.
Cool. So you use the media to get me to sign up, but then I'm hosting I don't even know what a local event is.
A market for small businesses.
By the way, I love the new thing we've entered here. So not only are you dealing with the whole local news problem, then we have the loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
So two very good missions.
And by the way, it's always saying like, so I live in the suburbs, right? I lived in suburbs my entire life. It's always been, oh, you live in the suburbs? How is that? That must be really boring.
Right.
And it really is boring.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to find out what's happening locally.
Right. The events probably that are happening locally now, this is like a judgmental call that I'm going to make, probably also aren't good.
Well, some of them are really good. Some of them are like kind of like learn about how to do your taxes. And so it's kind of like...
How do you solve... So that's, I guess, my next question. How do you solve the experience problem where I get the news part? You're gonna get me to have an easily accessed digital version of my county news. How do you get good events and promote the right ones and make it something where like someone trusts it? Because again, now we get to the concern of like Nextdoor or Facebook group of
it totally
when I
makes
go
sense.
there. Yeah.
So the first thing I'd like to define is that Nextdoor only constitute for pretty much half of what I'm trying to do. Okay. Nextdoor is a consumer-to-consumer platform. They have a little bit of events. My competitors are more like on the lines of Smart News and Newsbreak. Okay. Now, these are foreignly owned local news aggregators. They were both founded, one was founded in Japan, one was founded in China. They're both 10 years old. They both generate very little revenue and are both unicorns. So they're like kind of like this weird play on buying, I like to say kind of buying influence in the United States.
It's kind of like the same thing with like local radio stations. Is that the same vibe?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the part is that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to transfer both into one. Local news and local events. Nextdoor is just local events and a little bit of bickering between neighbors. And these other platforms are just local news, local news aggregators. So right now it's based off of, essentially with categories. So you could filter through the categories. The goal is that it's actually going to be like a questionnaire that you fill out and you'll be able to kind of be matched with then a surplus of events that are happening in your area that might match more of your social needs. So you might say like, oh, I do have kids, so we'll send you more kid-friendly events. But if you say, I don't have kids, we're not going to send you the event of toddlers meet up at Gramercy Park or whatever.
It's interesting. Okay, so I'll tell you what's going on in my head, and then we can talk about it from a product perspective.
Sure.
As a founder,
yeah,
I don't know that like I think it's a clever acquisition method, but I don't know that it gets the right group or cohorts together for the event part. Like it's two startups in a way. You're going, I've got local news aggregator and I've got kind of events matchmaking thing. I know that's not exactly right, but the reason that it comes out like that from me is because those feel like two different user journeys. So when I sign up for local news, I might not be signing up for events. That's your wedge. But then like to get me to do that other thing in my head is going to be harder.
Right.
So that's my founder brain. Let me put that aside for a second and just give you the pitch feedback version of that, which is like, I think your pitch, especially past your minute when you're getting to it, the investor, you're going to have to convince a lot of investors about what I just mentioned, which is like, how do they make the journey? Why is it justified to join a local news aggregator to then engage in its events portion of it?
Sure.
Because it's there is one good reason. If you get so many people signing up, some will naturally spill over to the other tab that's events.
Yeah.
But I think you have to have, for investors, an even more compelling, well, we believe that once they're on, I'm going to make something up that's obviously a bad idea, because we'll see which articles they read from the local news. We will then force them into an event. But I don't think that's as obvious as it may seem to you.
Sure.
So that's something to figure out from a pitch perspective. Let me zoom back out founder to founder.
Yeah.
How do you think you're going to solve that?
How I'm going to solve people who go to the app
for
news and
really
find
engaging.
events.
Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing is that the suburbs are boring. So people want an app for also events. People want an easy way of listing events. People want an easy way of finding events. And quite frankly, it's sort of like local news just tackles one of the many problems that, people who live in the suburbs have. People have this lack of information in the suburbs. So I think it just kind of actually fits quite easily. It's sort of like, the current ways of finding local events that are happening are hyper-local Facebook groups or flyers that you see in the local businesses' windows. So
I'm going to go to pitch feedback and wrap us here. I'm fascinated by the idea, by the way.
Yeah.
So super interesting. From a pitch perspective, I think your challenge is you have someone who's predisposed to like your idea here.
Yeah.
I care about the loneliness epidemic. I care about the aggregation of our media. I care about local media. I can imagine all the portions of your product and every individual thing that you've said as answers to my thing, to my questions. I can buy your individual answers.
Right.
The challenge with your pitch to me, and I think will be a bigger challenge to people who aren't as predisposed to agree with everything you're saying. So most venture investors will have something they don't care about as much as you and I care about, is they will have an even further all of your things in isolation. Yes, when you put them together, I'm not convinced. Now, I'm not saying no.
Right.
So could you in a year have so many users of what's it called? Towns of?
Towns of.
And some of them spill over to events and it makes sense to me.
So our tagline is the one-stop shop for all things local.
That's hard.
Thank
right?
you.
So but not meant from like difficult.
Oh, okay.
Also as a statement, it's good. But from the perspective of those are individual startups also in my mind.
Maybe, but I'd push back on this. Nextdoor has figured out a way of making a multi-billion-dollar product. Newsbreak has figured out a way to making a multi-billion product. People who use Nextdoor and people who use Newsbreak use them for separate reasons, but I think they're all based around being local.
I think this is a pitch thing, less a product thing. So you're right. Let me tell you how you're right and how it's hitting me differently.
Sure.
You could convince me that you have the billion-dollar unicorn just in the news thing.
Right.
You could convince me you have it just in the events thing. I'd be less convinced on the events thing because events is super hard.
I agree.
Media is weirdly also hard, but easier somehow than events. So I think what I'm saying to you is not, the opportunity is not clear. I think when you pitch, though, people will see you pitching the all-in-one and go, okay, I'm not sure those two things fit in the same all-in-one. Okay. Kind of because of how hard it is, right? I don't know that means you will be able to assuage them of that, right? Mm-hmm. So for example, when I'm up here and here I'm a founder, I'm imagining a lot of things. I probably would have, if there was an easy answer, I would have come up with it with you almost. Like, I don't think there's an easy answer of you going, here's how they sign up for news, and I'm going to really make it engaging for them to sign up for events. It might just be spill. Like, that might be your answer. But I think in your pitch, you want to be clear about the relationship there of not only the things we talked about of like make clear what you are, but then also maybe be clear as to like how you expect people to spill from news to events, because that's the part that's unobvious. Other than the fact, by the way, that you're aggregating people who are near each other.
Right.
Maybe just say that a lot, right? Like maybe just repeat over and over again, don't forget they're near each other, therefore we have the advantage of giving them events. That sounds kind of compelling as I say it, but you have to like repeat it to me so often of like, well, the reason none of the other events companies have worked in the space is because they don't have people near each other. And we're getting people near each other. And you just repeat that over and over. Again, there's no tying motion to that, right? When you repeat that over and over, the challenge you have, and again, that doesn't mean it'll work on people and maybe you'll raise a ton of money just repeating it, but the jump is the hard part, right? Let me give you an example of what a jump that sounds easy sounds like is like, again, it's the bad example I gave. Because we know which articles they read, we'll be able to suggest the right events. I don't think that's that clever, but that sort of thing is the tie together that I'm referring to of like the experience of one thing leads to the good experience of another. But again, I like all the individual parts here, and I think you don't need to solve this other than for pitching. I think from a product perspective, I understand it. So kudos to you and good luck because I believe in the mission.
Thank you so much. All right, appreciate it.
Any questions from Crown on that?
Can you just talk a little bit more about your critique of the all-in-one for X? Because I think that's an often common practice and seeing
all-in-ones sound fantastic and work from a pitch perspective when it's obvious how you jump between the parts of it. They sound difficult when that part isn't as obvious. As an example with him, like I couldn't quite imagine the huge advantage he has in the hyperlocal events coming from getting people to sign up for news. It's not because I don't get that they're going to be near each other. So when you sign up for, if you're in Bergen County and you sign up for the Bergen County news aggregator, it's true that you're going to have a lot of people signed up and are near each other. Therefore, it's likelier that you're going to be able to give them events, but it's just likelier. Versus, can you tie those journeys together? So an all-in-one that sounds fantastic has a reason that signing up for one will lead to good use for the other. What's a good example of this? If I'm building, I'm going to use a broad example. If I'm building CRM, it makes sense for me to build marketing email solutions to you because I'm also helping you collect the records of all your customers. That's my advantage is I have all your customer data. I allow you to cohort and segment. And anytime your customers do anything, we have all of these new triggers based on your CRM data. So I can build a really sophisticated email marketing suite on top of that. So I'm going to build you an all-in-one HubSpot, Salesforce. So yeah, all-in-one suffer from this, which is a founder will naturally be, let's call it appealed to by the ways in which the all-in-one will make each part convenient. And again, that could work. Whether it sounds of others, it could be that if you collect 2 products or 4 products in a suite, they actually will happen to, the users will cross-pollinate just by happenstance. You have enough users and it happens and it causes good momentum. But it's better when the journeys can tie to each other.
Love the idea. I grew up in a small town in Hawaii, Kailua, and I feel like I can relate to this because, small, like your local news, I worked at a deli where they sold a newspaper. So like that's how people would get their local news. But shifted from that to social media, these Facebook groups, Instagram pages where they would post, but it was very biased one way where it would kind of turn people away from that. So love the idea. I guess my question is, as a founder who's starting a news site, the moral and ethical code of what is true, what is not, and everything like that. So I'm curious, like that side of the platform.
Well, so I won't answer for him, and we can't continue to. Don't worry, you can talk to each other afterwards. But I'll give you kind of a proxy for it, which is this is one of the value props I imagine in my head, right? Which is the aggregator, if it does a good job, will only work if it gets both sides of a town. Mm-hmm. And this is something, again, depending on the investor, you can actually double down on, of like, realize this is apolitical at first. Mm-hmm. And that's actually an advantage versus the user-generated content. So the fact, for example, you get the local news and all of it, and by the way, it might all be biased, but his app would be able to claim, you're getting the local news here. versus you're getting only perspectives. And that advantage is probably something that actually attracts users to the platform at first. Is it's the newspapers. It's not necessarily your neighbor literally speaking like it is on Nextdoor.
Yeah.
And over time, it'd be up to him to keep that promise. He'd have to. It almost would, I think, right? Like every startup, every company can succeed despite things like this. But I think his only would succeed if the promise to every neighborhood was, we're aggregating all of these sources, because as soon as he failed to do that, it just becomes Nextdoor or Facebook group. And so people will churn out. You don't need his app to read the Bergen Record in Bergen County. And so again, it'd be because you're getting all of it. He has to decide to keep that promise.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, the market will force it, actually. There's a mic right there.
Thank you so much. So so I remember reading a rant by Emmett Shear similarly a couple of months back, right, where he was talking about, hey, there doesn't really exist this kind of a network of either even user generated or from the local source and then local. But I think like from what I understood from that Twitter rant was that at the end of the day, if let's just take a step back and understand what's happening, right? You're creating these groups of people in hyper-local communities where they're creating content within each other. But again, the premise being in suburbia is that nothing really happens. So why don't I go check what's happening over the next town, right? Which is essentially how the internet was born. So how do you fight that as somebody when it's so easy, when you have a system working here, you have a system working in another county over, let me just try to do because it works at scale, right? Because it's very, very scalable.
Well, and this is the thing that he's not really addressing, but Emmett's probably talking about and is the problem that I don't know if a startup's going to solve or if this is like a societal problem, which is you need multiple people on the ground who are trustworthy in some aspect. And you will always find enough interesting stuff for some amount of people. And so the desire to go cross, kind of functional is either A, you're bored, or B, there isn't enough transparency or intel about what's happening around you. I'm going to guess most of the time that second thing is what's happening, even in a quiet suburb. It's not necessarily that the suburb is not notable to its residents. It's that there's nobody uncovering what's interesting inside that suburb. Now, in some suburbs, that's going to be like a deli opened and I need to cover that versus, scandal in the school district, right? So there are different stories, but the different thing that, somebody has to solve, he'll help if it works, right? But is how do you fund the individuals doing more news-like reporting versus user-generated content? And that's something I think is not really easy for anybody to tackle directly because the only thing we've seen in the past few years that tackles that directly is local Substacks. So there are a bunch of examples, probably not nearly enough for it to be like a societal level impact, but there are a bunch of examples of local Substacks where it's a local journalist who used to work for a local paper that said, the local paper's dying, can local residents pay $4, $12 a month? And those people care enough about their surroundings that they're going to pay that person to execute the act of journalism. And I think we need to see more of that, as part of what you're talking about and part of what Emmett's talking about. And again, that goes to the aggregation portion of this and all of that, because as soon as you have people looking left and right, including the people making the news, you lose the value, right? So much of this value comes from it's about the people around you, but you need people acting on that. That's why, if you go to any high school, right, they've got their local paper for the high school. It still works, right? Even though it's high school. And it works because when people are doing the act of journalism or of media, they will find something to talk about. Yeah. Shall we welcome the last founder up? Round of applause. What's your name?
My name's Odette.
Odette?
Yes.
You looked nervous there for a second when you looked at the crowd. Are you feeling nervous?
No, I'm good.
There are no lights, there's no cameras, just me and you up here. You're going to have a minute to pitch. Tell us what you're building, get some feedback. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Odette, you have great energy for this last pitch. What are you building?
All right, so every existing system has been built to make salons fail. You have Groupon that pays salons pennies for every dollar, and existing booking systems that don't solve the core of the problem, customer loyalty and revenue generation. That's why 1 in 2 salons fail every single year and no one is helping them. On the flip side, we as consumers have seen the rising cost of the beauty tax. It has never been this expensive to get my hair and nails done before, and my wallet is hurting. That's why we started Beauty Right Back, a monthly affordable subscription offering unlimited booking access to top salons in New York City starting at $99. That's right, unlimited hair, nails, waxing, brows, and more for affordable monthly fee. For salons, no more wasted marketing spend, and no more empty seats. We drive your revenue and appointments on autopilot with a full salon operating system and POS.
Under a minute. Good job.
Yeah.
Well done. Everyone can see that I deal with this problem every single day with my editing. What's funny is, not this week. I was lazy this week and I've got, this hand injury. I do go in for my beard on a weekly basis. So I actually very much feel like
BRB Man is coming.
There we go.
Okay?
Exactly. So I love, I've actually often thought, this is a funny story actually, I've often thought this should exist for barbers because I go in regularly for this, and I've negotiated sometimes, not right now with the one I go to, but I've sometimes found like barbers where the owner clearly isn't paying attention, so I can like negotiate with the individual person and like, can I come in weekly and pay you a much smaller amount and get this done? And usually they're going to say yes, because as the individual stylist in that case, they realize the subscription revenue from me. So I love this from a couple different categories. Love also the stat, the 1 in 2 salons stat. That's fantastic. Again, those who didn't catch it, 1 in 2 salons is failing every year. Let me ask the broad question in my brain. There are a couple of people tackling back office for beauty and salons.
It's been done so many times.
Right. Why have they never tried to tackle this as an add-on to their core business? I can kind of guess why. If you're building a point of sale and all this other stuff, why would you get into consumer subscription? But I feel like some of them got into like the middle of the engagements a little bit and could have been well positioned to offer an all-you-can-eat. Or am I wrong?
So there are so many booking systems out there,
Yeah.
way too many to name, and they've all raised great rounds of venture money.
Yeah.
But they all charge like a one-time recurring SaaS fee to the salon only, and sometimes they'll charge a small transaction fee off of the appointment. But the nature of our business is a double-sided marketplace where we charge the customers pay through us, and then we have the supply side of the salons. So the issue with the booking systems is that they've never actually been able to build out the demand side. So they don't have access to customers' wallets. And so that's why this has never been done.
Got it. And they've never found that appealing because they're truly building back office software, so it wouldn't make sense. Okay, that's fair enough. So then let me get into the economics of this. I mean, if this works, it's a simple, I don't mean this to trivialize your business at all. I mean this in a good way. A simple business of, the subscription fees are in aggregate a larger amount than these salons are getting when enough consumers are paying the fee. So in other words, if enough consumers are paying, how much did you say yours was?
So prices range. The basic tier is $99 a month, and then the highest tier is $380 a month.
So if $99 to $380 a month across an aggregate number of consumers is larger than the total dollars currently going out from their pockets for individual appointments, then your business works. It's just a matter of convincing enough salons and consumers over a short enough time frame, and you're going to build something huge. Help me critique you. What would someone say to what I just said as to why that's going to be really challenging?
You can't do it, or like, why would anyone ever?
Yeah, but why
you?
would they think that? Because again, if enough, again, think about this from a macroeconomic perspective. Whether you're a salon owner or a consumer, if I can put more dollars out monthly as a consumer and get flexibility, ease of access to what I need for my hair, and I as a salon owner and a beauty owner can have more guaranteed dollars on a monthly basis, I'm generally not going to fight that.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we launched it in December, we launched our MVP in December. And as with any marketplace, you need some type of jumpstart action, right? So you need kind of to jumpstart supply and demand and activate it at the same time, which is often the hardest part and why people are unable to start marketplaces, because there's no way unless you have a huge capital influx and
cold start.
fake. Yeah. Until you can fake until you make it, So what we did is, for one reason or another, we got 10 salons before we paid them any money. We had 10 salons that paid us and said, let's do it.
For a pilot?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then that's how we were able to jumpstart.
And they paid you just...
they pay us a license fee to us.
Interesting.
To
be on
use
the
our
platform.
software and booking platform
Oh,
and
okay.
everything, right? So they pay
So you do have back office software as well?
We have a full salon management system, employee management, scheduling, all that, and POS.
Do you want to?
It was easy to build. Yeah.
Were they using one of the tech competitors or no?
Yeah, so they use maybe Square, Zenoti, Vagaro, Acuity. There's a lot out there.
What's the big one that is a startup?
Boulevard.
And are you as good as Boulevard, let's say?
So there's so many micro features that you can do. You can this is better, this is better, this has email campaigns, this doesn't, this has loyalty points, this doesn't, blah, 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 blah. The core of our aspect is not saying, okay, is the core booking system better or worse? For a salon, you need to be able to take appointments, you need to be able to sign waivers, you need to be able to track customers, you need to be able to talk to customers and move around their appointments. Like there's core features of a booking system. What none of them offer is guaranteed revenue every single week, right?
So do you have to use your booking system, by the way?
Yes.
You do have to.
Well, we sync into any existing booking system.
Oh, so you don't have to. Okay. Because I assume you don't care if they do. I mean, it makes your product probably easier in a variety of ways to use for both sides, but like...
So the reason why is because salon owners, like let's say, the customer's running late or whatever, they can chat with the salon owner, hey, I'm running late, like through our system, so it's easier.
Pitch feedback about that I'm going to come back to. So if I forget it, feel free to remind me that like I want to say something about whether or not you should say you care about people using your back office. I'll come back to it. I have more questions though. Has anyone tried this yet?
Yeah, we have, we've generated...
No, sorry, before you.
Before me?
Yeah.
So, there was a company called Vive that tried to do it for blowouts only, and then you have Gloss Lab that does it in New York. They own physical locations, they have leases, they do it for gel manis, and then you have Dry Bar, that same thing, franchise model, they do it for blowouts only.
But all those are only their own properties.
Yeah, but the issue with that is the customer retention sucks because you're only offering one service. So if they don't need a blowout that 1 month, they're going to churn. And the same thing like Manny's, whatever. With us, when you subscribe via us, at default, you get access to all different categories of appointments.
And across merchants?
Across merchants. You can visit any of our partner salons in Manhattan.
But
Brooklyn.
No one's tried that before? That surprises me. Interesting. I guess like the owned and managed model is probably higher margin, but requires capital infrastructure. So I'm surprised. Okay. And so this is just going on a trend of all this has become more normalized too over the past 5-6 years in terms of like, especially amongst the female demographic, I assume, going for these services and paying them out for these services. Is that like a macro trend that you're also hopping onto, or is that not that important?
What do you mean in terms of?
People spending more consistently month by month on these services as social has taught them, here's what to do, here's all the things.
So that's the thing is people aren't, right? So we found out that if there's the biggest issue with salons is there's no customer loyalty. They jump around like no other.
Because they're cost saving.
They're cost saving. They're looking at a Groupon coupon here. They're looking at a cool new nail trend at this salon, So
they are getting service every month, but they're doing it like piecemeal.
Yeah, they like to, customers enjoy jumping around. Now, some customers have their preferred, they get their haircut at the same salon owner all the time. That's wonderful. Some customers are not like that. We're able to address all types of customers because if you subscribe via Beauty Right Back, you can keep rebooking at the same salon provider every single month for your haircut, but you can also go and try out the different salons. So you can book at any of the salons.
What do top salons say about this? I assume they're the hardest conversation to have because they probably go, we don't want to cannibalize, our brand or have guaranteed, we have high prices in comparison to maybe some of the other salons on your...
So that's wrong because we had a salon come inbound to us and emailed me, and they're a celebrity salon that has over 100K followers on Instagram. They do celebrity facials for Rihanna, Sabrina Carpenter, etc. So I was like, why do you want to talk to me? We went on a Zoom call and he was like, I'm so popular, but I'm in so much debt because rent is so high. And
so let's take him aside for a second. Do you think other really high-end salons, though, will say something like what I said?
Well, here's the thing: even if you have great social media presence and you are a top salon that charges $800 facials or whatever, you don't have consistent bookings. You don't have any customer loyalty. It's the
recurring nature that is really overall. But do Boulevard or these other solutions allow them to set it up for their customers?
No.
Okay, interesting. Because I want you to,
they don't. So let's say you can do subscriptions on Square, right? So you set up so one of our salons actually, Naomi Wright, they have subscriptions. They offer subscriptions. Okay, one person has bought their subscription in the past however many years, right?
And do you think that's because they need to acquire a different customer?
They need to go acquire. They need to go sell that subscription themselves. It's really hard to sell a subscription if you only have a subscription for one location.
So this is where, let me reorient the pitch. So I think your pitch, I like your pitch in general in terms of the storytelling and how you understand your customer and the stats you shared. whether it's the minute pitch or the conversation that happens right afterwards, I think a lot of the things you're going to want to share, especially, by the way, there would have been a female VC if she didn't cancel today, but a male VC will be often who you're speaking with, whether that's good or bad. It's mostly going to be bad because you're going to teach them about the industry. But even a female VC, I think one of the things you're going to want to do is establish some of these facts early. In other words, don't let me get to the question of like, what is a high-end salon going to think? Because you're allowing me to sit for a while with this objection that you could probably easily handle right after. Your minute pitch was very world building in a good way. And so again, whether you're in a longer conversation or the initial portion of a pitch meeting, immediately go, let me explain some things about salons to you on why this is so important and different than what they can do today. And what you have to understand is to sell a recurring customer in your existing customer base is next to impossible. You need to acquire a customer on this basis, or we need to acquire that customer for you. In fact, we're mostly giving new customers to a lot of our, I'm making this up, new customers to a lot of our salons who they then keep because they're on the subscription and they like someone that they find and they want to go to that person over and over again. And we're creating an aggregate more, again, dollars out of consumers' pockets into salons in total. So anyone in our network is in aggregating more dollars out of this. The reason you want to kind of tell some of this story of what is a high-end salon going to think, or why is recurring not happening now, these are all my questions, is because the longer you let me sit with them, the more I'm thinking like, why hasn't this been tried, or where have other people failed? You're in an industry where like, it doesn't feel impossible to have tried this before.
Well, people try it, but just with one service, and that's where they go wrong.
And you should even answer that question, right? So there's like almost a post-pitch pitch that I want you to have of like, let me handle all the easy stuff. As the founder, let me handle all the easy stuff right away, because then the person will get to much more interesting questions that you want to talk to them about, and they'll challenge you with of like, which markets are going to be good for this? How's this going to work in the suburbs or in rural areas? I don't want you to get past my dumb questions, so to speak, because most of my dumb questions you easily answered, but I had to draw it out of you, right? I had to be like, what is a high-end salon going to think? And you're going to convince me like, look, even a high-end salon, even when they charge you $1,500 to a celebrity, will still prefer 7 customers that they're charging $200 to for the same service, but is recurring month over month. And you have to like explicitly say that. Again, in the post pitch, I think your minute pitch, from what I remember from it, felt really solid and I felt really compelled. It's that, again, I want you to have almost like a 2-minute post pitch that is very much just getting all of that junk out of the way.
Yeah, the objections and
because again, it's a crowded space, not literally, right? It doesn't sound like you have a lot of competitors. It's a crowded space in my mind because there are back office solutions to this, there are fintech solutions, not to this, to the overall salon or small mid-sized business. The subscription portion of this is interesting, and so my head goes like, why not already? And you have answers, package them, put them out there. Then the investor is going to accelerate with you into a meatier conversation about stuff that otherwise would have taken you a little bit of time to get into. Last question for you, again, super compelling pitch. This early moment, all this stuff that you're doing on subscription, what's the consumer portion of this experience? We didn't get to that at all because I was so curious about like what salons will think and how you get them on board. How easy is it to convince consumers? How's that experience been?
I spent $0 on marketing, and we have over 500 customers.
And that's just because, they're spending all this money anyway.
Yeah.
You mentioned Groupon, all this other stuff that they're doing. Does it wind up just being cheaper for them to do this?
So there's a few things. So when we sign up with a salon, they give us a Beauty Right Back dedicated chair, right? So if they see high volume, they will add more chairs, but that chair is for the most part, but they're only taking Beauty Right Back customers. Beauty Right Back customers have booking preference for those chairs. So that means even if it's like a pop-in salon, you as a Beauty Right Back customer can easily book and find a time, and you have booking preference over their regular customers for that chair, right? So it's really easy to book and get in. You can book unlimited, so you're no longer shelling out per appointment. So it's like girl math. It's like, oh, I paid for it already. Like I can just keep going, right? And it works, And like you pay like a pretty medium size for whatever your wallet is, a pretty like decent subscription, but now you're going to all these appointments and you're going to keep paying because it's worth it. And if you paid per appointment, it would
increase your price at some point, I guess.
if you paid per appointment, it would have been so much more expensive. So you might as well just keep it. And people keep paying even if they're like traveling for a week and whatnot. So, and they didn't book that week, but they're going to book next week. So it's this whole like subscription element of when you blend the time between, this is a tangent and like how the subscription works, but if you blend the amount of time that a customer is actually spending in the salon versus their subscription price, we're profitable on every single subscription
It's
tier.
the fitness and the gym model.
Yeah.
I do think, by the way, I'm going to give you this feedback because I want you to have it. And I think other people who are building this sort of business, you have a very obvious business. You are now entering areas where I disagree with you for reasons you don't want me to get into. Not literally, we can get into it. You don't want my brain to get into. As an example, I think you're going to increase your prices. Now, I might be wrong, but the reason I think you're going to increase your prices is I think, unlike the gym model, I think the customer segment you're targeting is going to love your product and going to abuse it eventually, whether they do or not now. You might tell me I'm wrong, and I might be wrong. But my point is, when you're thinking about pitching investors, this is an area you actually don't want to get into with me at all. So in other words, don't get to the part where like, you say, for example, say you're already profitable because that's a cool fact, but don't be convinced that you won't increase your price if I say something. In fact, you should, even with me, like the way you would do it is almost be like, yeah, maybe, and you move on because you're like, no. Because the thing is, when we fight about that, it's not what's interesting or hard about your business, right? I might be entirely wrong, but my preconceived notion is your good customers are going to become so good at using your product compared to a gym product because the benefits are far more immediate. Think about that, right? Like the gym, the reason the gym and fitness thing happens still might be wrong for a variety of reasons in the segment, but the reason it's different to me in my head, the gym and fitness thing is a long-term play. To get gains, to see the gains of going to the gym, people who go to the gym, the reason they don't go is because none of that's immediate, none of that's short-term. With a lot of your products, if not all of them, the visual that your consumer is going to get is immediate. And so I can imagine over time, they're going to build really aggressive habits in using it.
So the whole reason why the unlimited membership works and that we don't need to do a credit-based system like ClassPass is because in the human body, you have your physical limitations and credits already built in. Like you're only going to get your haircut.
I don't think it's that you need to do credits. I think you're going to have to increase your prices. But again, my point is, don't get into this with an investor, right? Like it doesn't matter.
I mean, we built this like whole like math model on like how frequency of service.
And
like,
someone who's like in a seventh meeting with you will get into that.
Yeah, like if you do acrylic nails every single day, your nails are going to fall off.
I think some people will do that though. I think some people do that. I might be wrong, but I think there are things that they will do. But again, it doesn't matter. That's not what's interesting about your business. To be clear, I think your business, if there isn't a competitor already like trying to compete with you, sounds to me, well, yeah, that's tremendous potential. And so you want to pick with an investor, like, are there things they're accidentally triggering in their brain of like, I'm not sure about this part, right? Like, like the pricing thing between you and me is not a useful, I don't know anything about this, right? But in my head, I go, your consumer is going to become fanatical. So just think about like, don't accidentally trip over those traps because they're not why I would or wouldn't invest. Super interesting business though. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, just to double down on my feedback there, when you have such a compelling business, this happened, I feel like the last time I did a solo episode, there was a founder where like, Jake, you remember this? I kind of told the person, you're going to be rich as they walked off stage. And I have a similar feeling here. Like, I don't know a lot about this space, but it feels like if there isn't something that she's fundamentally lying to me about, not on purpose, but like something that I'm missing about the market, then it's just up to some founder, and it could be her, to execute perfectly to acquire those consumers and the salon owners and make it happen. Anytime you're in a good conversation about your company, the thing you also then want to avoid is what are the accidental traps? What are the things job seekers, we advise a lot of job seekers as part of our agency, and job seekers do this all the time, which is you're past some of the main topics and you accidentally begin to talk about things that are optional objections. What are things you say are true about the world that I disagree with? Another good founder example, there was a founder a couple months ago who was talking about building kind of like a marketplace for open source AI models and AI data players to like meet to sell training data so that they can train more models, blah, blah, blah. And super interesting, but as part of his initial pitch, he says the phrase, open source always wins. We've seen it with, I don't remember his two or three examples. And me and the investor was Charlie Ma of Pathlight, both had the same reaction of, we like open source, but open source doesn't always win. Most open source is monetized excellently by private companies. And we see that time and time again. There are places where open source is the prevalent technology implementation that developers might use for certain product. But again, the monetization of open source has primarily been through the mechanism of private companies building on top of it. And he said that thing, and it wasn't necessary, right? We weren't in that conversation to just debate whether or not private companies most make money through open source. He had a cool platform for open source models to acquire data for their AI training purposes. I don't need to believe open source is the everything to believe the rest of what he's building. I'd say there's similar dynamics to that pitch. It's especially true when there's so much agreeable about your pitch. Don't get into the stuff that's disagreeable about your pitch or your approach. Yeah. Questions? Right here? Yeah, feel free to grab.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. If that works, and assuming there's no fundamental lies,
yeah,
you're going to be a rich person.
Yeah.
And as a consumer, I'll say immediately, I'm going to race home to my girlfriend, who's African American, by the way, and whose hair takes a minimum $350 plus to do,
right,
and 3, 4, 5, 6+ hours when she goes and gets her braids done in Harlem or wherever. And I'm going to say, get this immediately.
Yeah.
I would suggest also a solution for both the consumer and a solution for the supply and demand side would be going like an approach. You mentioned gyms like Blink. I use Blink. And I don't know if anyone uses Blink, but there's this tiered system where a solution that's going to help the demand side, both sides, is I go to only one local gym around me and I pay less for that because the others aren't walking distance, yada, yada. And you want to build retention for these salons. That sounds like the big problem. So I would immediately implement that at a number X that is less than 99. I don't know your margins, but
well, it sounds like she did have tiering. We didn't get to it. This is, again, kind of feedback that is so important even for job seekers. We didn't get to it kind of because we got stuck on other topics, me and her. So she had tiering. Okay, I heard her say it multiple times.
Awesome.
We didn't get to talk about what it was. And again, think from not to make it always about the pitch, but I think this is the important lesson for founders to learn from seeing this on stage. I kind of got caught up with her in stuff that I was saying because I liked her idea. And she thought of it as challenges to say, here's why it's working today. And you don't need to always do that. A question is often an invitation. A question is often an invitation to tell a story of a kind. And when we tell a story of a kind, again, we might not get stuck now in the weeds. If we hadn't got caught up in some of those other things, as an investor, that's exactly where my brain would go.
Yeah, then forget all that. That's awesome. And my last comment is I run a consumer app that tells people what to do around the city. And, you can just plug it in. So if you want to talk, happy to bring you more users.
There we go. So super interesting founders. Kudos to all of them. Let's give them a round of applause, actually. All the founders. One of the things that was true today that isn't always true is how close these people are to a mission or consumer fire. I think sometimes we hear ideas, these are just as genuine and awesome, but they're more mechanically oriented, right? It's like someone built a good idea or built a good business model and is building on top of it. When you're in these areas where you're closer to mission, again, think of Towns Of as another example of this, where there's a lot of leaning in someone can do because they experience your problem or they believe in your problem. One of the things to do as a founder is tap into that when you see it. The way to transition from a general pitch to this compelling buyer is to live in narrative. That's a lot of where I wanted them more. Again, a question is invitation. What's a story you can tell in response to a question that gets more at the nagging thing about your product? So for example, with Towns Of, the nagging thing is media and we started talking about this a little bit afterwards, the lack of local journalists. In the case of Odette, the nagging thing is this whole concept of consumers wanting to engage in this behavior on a constant basis. So there's always this nagging thing. So a question like, what's going to happen with this business model when you go to this type of vendor is an invitation to say something about vendors over the next 4 years or 5 years, to say something thematic about the consumer over the next 5 years. Actually, I think the first founder did that with the style question of here's what's, interesting about style versus fit and why we're targeting style and how that's going to be different over time. And being on these websites is more interesting than building a marketplace. You can answer questions as a founder. Again, you can see them as invitations, rant broadly. Don't avoid a question. So if I asked, how many consumers have signed up for your app, don't just rant for an hour. But these broader questions, you can sometimes actually get away with a rant, include your more specific answer amongst it. But I think a lot of founders actually don't act political enough in either answering more than the question or an adjacent question than the one that's being asked by an investor. So that's my takeaway. Again, shout out to these 4 founders. Since it was a smaller group than usually is, I'm not going to give my favorites. They're all my favorites. They're all my babies today. Thank you so much for coming. One more shout out to my team of the Feedback Loop. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.